this platform where he will be able to continue speaking to us, but in the context of what God has laid out to him. So you will realize that I don't have the right vocabulary really to define this new context, but it will unfold as we go. It will begin to make sense as it unfolds, and we'll begin to get clarity on it. So my prayer is that as he speaks, clarity will come to us. As he speaks, we'll begin to see this new definition of what God is doing. And then for those of you, and many of us in this room have related with Andy in different aspects, I'm sure. And I'm sure we all have sensed that there's a very unique dynamic, a very clear purpose that God has for what he is supposed to carry out. And that could speak into the amount of processes and amount of warfare he has recently endured just to get to this point. And with that in mind, I personally believe that the storm is over and the clarity of what God has in mind is coming forth. And with my conversation with Andy, a lot of the stuff that had clouded where he needs to go has been removed. So there's a pure clarity to what this is about and where this is going. So my position would be, guys, this is the day we listen with an open mind and an open heart, and we just let it soak, and then we go sit, pray through it, and then if we have the questions, we can ask. For a lot of us, this may resonate. For some, this may be very challenging. And for others, this may be quite disorienting. But let's believe that whichever context it comes to us, it is the Lord. It is the season in which the Lord is speaking to us. So once again, I just want to welcome you all. And I know we're in different time zones. For some of you, it is quite a sacrifice to be awake at this time and to really come on board and listen. But I can assure you, your confidence is not in vain. It shall truly be worth your while. So, Andy, I hand over to you now. Welcome, and speak to us. I guess anybody else who's coming on board will catch up as we go along. So because we are recording, they'll be able to get part of that recording.
Hey, Charles, thank you very much, man. Am I being heard loud and clear? I think I am. Am I? Okay, excellent. The nod at the head would suggest that I am. Well, welcome, everyone. This is Leadershift. I think we are doing this one-off meeting as a precursor to season 4 of Leadershift. And at the end of this presentation today, we will still maintain maybe about a 2 or 3 week hiatus, and then we will reconvene in order to really press the envelope forward. Over the last couple sessions of Leadershift, I think we laid a nice some nice groundwork that will allow us to kind of really hit the accelerator in this particular season. I think I mentioned last season that we want to start using it almost like create season 1, season 2, season 3. And this season, I want to really focus on some specific issues. As always, guys, just allow me to kind of say hi to a couple people who's on the call today. I see Sashri Ramaya from South Africa. Sash, how you doing, man? Can you unmute and say hi to all of us? Sashri, how you doing?
Hi, Anderson. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you guys. Looking forward to the year. It's really good to connect after a while. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, man, Sash. You look younger, boy, Sash. You're looking well, though.
Thanks.
COVID and all of the madness down in South Africa seem to be treating you well, Sashri.
Yeah.
Good to have you on the call today, Sashri.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Let me also say hi to Hobson down in Liberia. Let me just kind of let a couple guys say hello. It's been a while since we kind of interacted. We're going to get to this presentation shortly, but allow me to just say hi to a few people. Hobson down in Liberia, you're on mute, unmute your mic and say hi to us. Hobson, how are you doing down there? How things going?
Thank you so much. Yeah, Liberia is cool. We had the third wave of COVID, that the variant from India, but God helping us, the health team is battling it and it's going downward. it's not going up anymore. And we bless God. We thank God to see you too. And I mean, in spite of your health challenges, that you are now strong. I mean, strong, and you can talk to us. And we keep you in our prayers and pray that God completely heal you.
Good man,
Thank you so
Hobson.
much.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah.
Let me also let me ask Malcolm Sobers. He's on the call today for the first time. Listen, this is every now and again you run into some guys with real gravitas. And Malcolm Sobers happens to be one of those guys that I have a lot of regard, a lot of respect for. Malcolm is originally from Guyana. He's now based out in Canada. And he's on the call this evening for all kinds of different reasons. Malcolm, welcome to this call. Say hi to the compliment.
Thank you, Andy, and hi to everybody. I'm glad to be on the call and expecting to hear some significant things. Thank you.
Good, man. Good. I'm also, let me ask a couple more guys. I see Selvin from down in Pietermaritzburg. Listen, this guy, years and years and years ago, I can't remember how many years ago, Selvin spent some time with Selvin in Pietermaritzburg in South Africa. This is a substantial human being. And I'm not saying that in any way to flatter him, but one of the guys that I have always admired and always respected in South Africa, and he's deeply connected with Thamo Naidu, who is a personal friend of mine, but he's on the call today. I see Selvin is there and a couple of other guys. Let me ask Selvin to say hi. Selvin, welcome to the call, man. How you doing?
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, folks. Great to be with you all, and it's always a privilege to be able to listen to Anderson and appreciate the friendship and relationship over the years. Great to be here. We are in the midst of many crises in our country, but the Lord has been faithful. He has kept us all thus far.
Beautiful.
Looking forward to hearing you, Andy. Blessings.
Okay, man, Selvin. Good talking to you, man. Let me ask one other guy. Guys, I want you all must have known him well, but let me introduce you all to Randolph Barnwell. Randolph, let me tell you this. I listened to those audio I asked you about. Randolph recently did some teachings in his church about the whole issue of healing and wholeness. And we had a little chat a couple weeks ago, and I said, hey, send it to me. Let me kind of take a listen. Really good, clear, solid teaching on the areas of healing. And guys, if you all need to get some input in those areas, holler at Randolph. He really did a remarkable job in terms of good, sound biblical teaching. Randolph, welcome to the call this evening, man. How are you doing? Based in South Africa as well. Randolph, you could unmute and say hi.
Good evening, Anderson. Good evening, everybody on the call. Wonderful just to connect with everyone and to celebrate the grace that is resident within Andy and within the collective of everybody gathered this evening. It's a wonderful privilege just to listen in and to glean from the grace that God is presenting to us tonight. Thank you so much.
Good, man. Good to have you here, man. And one last person. I keep saying one last, but I need to do one more. Albert Kitcher down in Ukraine. Albert, this guy is he is the Ghanaian consular down in Ukraine, and so and also has a real significant call on his life and building significant things down in Ukraine. Albert is on the call this evening. Albert, welcome to the call, man. Albert, say hi to us.
Thank you so much, Andy. It's always a pleasure being here, and I'm looking forward to a very significant conversation. God bless you all, and greetings, everyone.
Beautiful. And let me do one more. Guys, allow me to just do one more. Raj is in Trinidad. He is one of the guys in Trinidad that really, I believe, has captured the wind and the direction of the Spirit, leads a church in the south of Trinidad. And Raj is on the call this evening. Raj, I see you and a few other guys from Trinidad on the call. Let me ask you to say hi. Good to have you on the call, Raj.
Well, hi to everybody from Trinidad here. We are 1:18 in the PM in the beautiful Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm so happy to be part of this conversation, Andy. Looking forward to hearing what God has to say. So blessings to all.
Beautiful. Okay, man, good. That's as much as I will do in terms of allowing people to jump on the call. Let me share my screen and then let's get straight to this conversation this evening. So I would really recommend that you take copious amounts of notes as always. And just before I get into this as well, let me also say thanks to all of you who have been consistently praying and lending your support during this entire season. It's been a long, arduous season. Some of you are not even aware of it because I'm one of those who tend to hold stuff very close to my chest. Those of you who are aware might know that I've been dealing with a series of issues over the last practically 2 years. Health challenges that just seem to be going on and on and on. And just at the point at which when you think that you have climbed that mountain, like the proverbial Sisyphus, that stone comes rolling right back on you. And that's been going on for 2 years. But we've just basically cleared a significant corner. And I would say about another 2 months or so of just dealing with what I call mop-up operations, and I should be well. However, despite all of the discomfort and challenges and issues, I am not one of those who would sit twiddling my thumbs and laying horizontal in a bed for too long. That is literally impossible. So I've been keeping myself fairly busy. And on top of that, I've been really spending significant amount of time just kind of peering into the mind of God and trying to understand not just what he wants to do, but more so trying to redefine my own sense of personhood, my own identity, recalibrate the nature of the call upon my own life, and trying to really do, trying to be clear in terms of how I re-emerge after this entire ordeal, because I don't think that this entire ordeal was just designed to create pain and discomfort, but I believe it was almost God's way to kind of pull me back from the fast pace that I was on, and also to kind of get me to turn my gaze in a more deliberate way towards him. And it's been the best way I could describe it is that it's been extremely painful, but it's been incredibly purposeful. And so, guys, it's not all bad. It's actually far better than you could ever think. So let's get into this conversation this evening. I'm going to try to do this in a way, guys, that that we will kind of gradually build towards a very important conversation. And as you were told, we want you to take notes, and you could post your concerns and write down your comments. Some of you could make direct contact with me now to find me. But let's talk this afternoon. Oh, sorry, that is not what I wanted. Hold on. Okay, yeah. So let's get into this. Oh, this is not doing what I wanted. Yeah. So let's get into this and talk about the Leadershift Ethos and what it looks like going forward. The agenda today is quite simple. We want to identify maybe about 4 areas. I'm going to start with a simple preamble. Then I'm going to identify what I call 6 gateway principles for season 4. These are gateway principles. I won't get into the depth of it. I'm basically giving you just enough that we could build on it going forward. And they are all very important that you capture it, that you understand it, because we will build on them and expand accordingly. So we look at these 6 gateway principles for season 4. Then next we will be dealing with what I call principles for polymathic power. That's a very important principle that we will explore, because in this conversation, we not only have Christian church leaders, we have businessmen, we have entrepreneurs, we have students, we have thinkers, we have philosophers, we have a whole range of people. We have educators, people coming from all different streams. And this platform, we want to expand it in such a way that we would not just be speaking to what we call Christian leaders or church leaders or pastors of spiritual communities. We want to expand that. And so I want us to drill into what I call principles for polymathic power. The word polymath basically describes an individual who is multi-gifted, multi-talented, a person who could function in all kinds of different levels. You read in the Word of God, and sometimes you see patterns of polymathic power inside of men who were ambidextrous. They had the capacity to use so much more than just their strong arm. They had capacity in all kinds of different areas. And there are concepts in the Word of God that will allow us to more or less begin to target areas in all kinds of kingdom influences, so that we could really provide an offering both to the Lord and to humanity that is relevant, that is up to date, and is significant. So we will get into principles of polymorphic power. Take note of that particular area, because that will become, for want of another word, the primary platform for all that we'll be talking about in this season 4. The next principle we will be dealing with this evening and going forward is looking at speaking truth to power, speaking truth to power. Now, we just gave these titles just a nice, comfortable kind of definition, but each of them really speak to something far bigger and far more expansive. So let's get into the preamble this afternoon and what is important as we're going forward. So this COVID-19 pandemic has been a disorienting kind of emergency and a generation-defining cataclysm. And if by now you are not aware of that, or if by now you are not convinced of that, then you are holding to all kinds of conspiracy theories, or you are living under a rock. Humanity has changed significantly. This has been, for want of another word, really a disorienting kind of emergency. And it is literally changing all aspects of our time, and it will continue to affect the way in which we go forward as a people and as a race. While this pandemic it has predominantly affected the lungs of people around the world, those who have been infected. While this pandemic has predominantly affected the lungs, the situational reality of this pandemic is that it has forced all of us to do some radical rethinking. So not only has this affected us physically, and people have died, and I'm sorry, and my heart goes out to any one of you on this call and wherever else we have lost loved ones during this pandemic. But the situational reality of this pandemic has caused us all to rethink in so many different areas. We have to rethink our priorities. And I'm hoping that you are sitting on this call and you are not just dealing with the COVID crisis solely from the perspective of hiding away in your house and subjecting yourself to cabin fever and becoming stir crazy by the madness that the lockdown in all of your different jurisdictions might be causing. But this pandemic has literally forced all of us to begin to rethink our priorities. It has caused us to rethink our functionality and executive ability, what we do, how we do it, why we do it, and how effective are we in doing it. And I guess every single one of us, whether you're a businessman, whether you're a politician, whether you're a church leader, this pandemic would have forced you to really think again the areas of your functionality and your executive ability. It has forced us to rethink the orbit of our relationships, people that you really want close, as well as people whom you thought are important to your whole life, but you suddenly realize that they really don't have the level of importance that you previously gave them. It has caused us to rethink our belief systems. What do we really believe? And the things that we've been preaching, is it relevant? Is it really necessary? More than that, it has forced us to rethink the relevance of our message. The relevance of our message. And not only the relevance of our message, but as I said earlier, our executive ability. Some of us spend more time going through an asthmatic kind of performance. I want you today to talk to you today. And we go through a whole bunch of real mad, crazy communication systems that at the end of the day, they have not produced any kind of functional, relevant believer. This entire pandemic, if you are a true leader and you are concerned about life going forward, this entire situation would have forced you to rethink the relevance of your message. And it would have also caused you to rethink the true expression of our love for others. Now that ellipsis at the end means that we could go on and on and on and identify other areas that this entire situation would have caused us to rethink, forced us to reconsider. But I'm sure that if I'm to ask every single one of you personally, what has this entire season done for you? Maybe I'm speaking out of my own personal situation, but for me, this entire situation caused me to rethink my priorities, my functionality, my executive ability, the orbit of my relationships, my belief system, the relevance of my message, and the true expression of how I truly ought to love and engage others. The issues of altruism really impacted my own life during this particular season. That's the nature of the times, right? Now, for many, listen to me, for many, this season was met with buyer's remorse. I'm sure some of you know what buyer's remorse is. You go to the shop and you invest in something, and then you suddenly realize that what you invested in, you really didn't get quality that you put out. When we think about this same concept, buyer's remorse, within the corridors of Christianity, there is an overwhelming sense of Paris syndrome. What is Paris syndrome? Paris syndrome is a term that's used by psychologists today to describe a great expectation that is met with a reality that doesn't connect. So Paris syndrome is like you sitting in some remote part of the world with this illusion that when you arrive in Paris, you will fall in love and things will blossom, romance will be dynamic. Your marriage that is teetering on the edge of insanity will suddenly grow and move into this enormous expression of love and buoyancy. And then you get to Paris and realize that the streets are dirty, the canals are messy, and people are just as messed up as where you exist. That's called Paris syndrome, meaning that your expectation really does not match your reality. And so for most persons within the corridors of Christianity, there is this overwhelming sense of Paris syndrome, because you join a network and you thought that that apostolic leader would basically shoot your life into the stratosphere of the miraculous, and your church would grow and things will blossom and all will be well, and suddenly you realize Paris syndrome. You connected to a particular message and you thought that message will be the panacea and it will suddenly break through and cause enormous stuff to take place around you, and it doesn't work. Paris syndrome. And if you are honest with yourself, in so many areas in Christianity, people have met their whole experience and how they have interacted and what has ricocheted back at them. It has been a Paris syndrome. The expectation really did not match the reality. More than that, as I said, this buyer's remorse, it's like buying into a process only to realize that the content really does not match the label. You join a network and they speak, wonderful terms about how you will do this and get this done and advance here, and you will grow and you'll connect to this grace and you'll advance here, and suddenly realize, listen, the content does not match the label. Now hear me well, because I'm working my way to something that I think is very important. But all over the world, and this is not just unique to, to you wherever you are as an individual, but I've been interacting with people all over. I've been doing stuff all over. I've been having seminars with leaders all over, and I have recognized that this is a trend all over, that there is an overwhelming sense of buyer's remorse. People are buying into a process only to realize that the content does not match the label. Listen, it's like saying yes to the current church model, then reading the nutritional facts only to see the frightening fine prints of side effects. You know, it's like, well, you join an organization, you be a part of this particular system, you say, I'm going to be a part of this fraternal, connect myself to this individual, and after you kind of been there for a while, you read the nutritional facts and realize that, listen, the side effects are so severe, it's as though this pill is not worth swallowing. And I am sure that many of you in this conversation, you are living right there. Buyer's remorse. You bought into a process and suddenly realize, but wait, now this thing is not working out the way it ought to. And it's not just a matter of how you have thrown yourself in. I know that sometimes that buyer's remorse could be the result of you have not thrown yourself in headlong and fully into the environment that God really wants you to throw yourself into in order to get value from it. But some people have literally given all of themselves, sacrificed so much in order to do as much as they believe is service to the Lord, only to realize that, listen, the nutritional facts, it has too many frightening fine prints that talks about side effects, and you don't want any of that. Listen, if Leadershift is to be a legitimate entity, it cannot add oxygen to the foggy miasma that passes for Christianity and apostolic networks in most circles. Now, I know that there are legitimate entities with strong functioning leadership, excellent membership, and they are really doing a remarkable work. Hence, I say in most circles. So Leadershift is not designed to be trying to siphon or suck members. We are not concerned, guys, about populating any organization. I personally am not concerned about forming some institution that will suck people to me. I'm not concerned. I have great relationships and I continue to pursue beautiful relationships with major apostolic leaders around the world. And at no point do I ever hold to the idea of trying to pull people away from their organization to me. I don't have an organization to start with, and I'm not much concerned about having any. However, Leadershift is just a platform that is designed to provide truth. As the literal PowerPoint slide says on the left, what we want is to speak wisdom among the mature. And Leadershift, if it is to be a legitimate entity, it cannot add oxygen to the foggy miasma that passes for Christianity and apostolic networks in most circles. Listen, we must be an alternative. And going forward in season 4, we want to be very deliberate. We must be an alternative that holds strongly to the truth of the word of God by allowing its revelation to inform our function. Listen, revelation was not designed to just kind of impress you. Revelation was not designed to kind of give people a new spin on concepts that they've heard before. Revelation is for function. And what we want in leadership is to hold very strongly to the truth of the word of God and allow revelation to inform our functionality. We must be an alternative. We must move from profundity to authenticity. I think someone has their mic on. Can you please mute your mic? We have to move from profundity to authenticity. I think we have come into a season of Christianity where people assume that depth in the spirit is measured by the profundity of your conversation. And we have to go back to the days of Job, where men gathered around Job and they had the ability to communicate the most profound concepts, but their profundity only left them as sorry advisors. And so we have to move away. We have to move from profundity to authenticity. Right here in leadership, we have to move from the frivolous to the serious. We have to move from the engineered to the organic. Now, we don't have the time to drill into all of these. We're dealing with leaders here. And so I want you to identify and capture all of the nuance that's buried in these concepts that if we have, and when I say we, I believe that you who are on this platform and who join us from time to time, that you too are committed to the very same objective. So we can remove leadership and we could talk about any single one of us, that we have to become a legitimate alternative, that we are not breathing any oxygen into this current distorted model that passes for Christianity. That we will not do. We will hold strongly to the truth of the word of God. We will allow revelation to inform our function. We are committed to moving from profundity to authenticity. We are committed to moving from the frivolous to the serious, from the engineered to the organic, from the nebulous to the obvious. When I say nebulous, we could sit down and have a lot of nice concepts, but those concepts are not formulating themselves into systems and practices and organizations and initiatives that we can literally kick and touch and see manifested. And so somehow, what we're going to do in this particular season and going forward, we have to move away from the nebulous to the obvious, that we have to build systems. We have to literally start schools. We have to literally begin to build organizations and make investments and create single-person economies, because we really don't have the time to waste our energies criticizing what everybody else might be doing, while at the same time, we are not formulating real hardcore alternatives for real. So we have to move from the nebulous to the obvious. We cannot genuflex anymore to incompetence and ineptitude. We've done a lot of that. We have accepted a lot of the lower class, insignificant, inappropriate, irrelevant systems, structures, and behaviors. And we've all allowed that to pass for God and pass for the Holy Spirit talking and pass for God directing. We cannot genuflect incompetence and ineptitude. We have to be deliberate and at the same time unapologetic in our Christocentric emphases. And that's important. Now, please understand again that we don't have the time to drill too deeply in a lot of concepts. I know some of you sometimes come on board platforms like these and you spend more time critiquing, looking to see whether we are speaking into your own biases, whether we are confirming some of your biases. These conversations are not designed to stroke your ego and satisfy your own conviction bias. You know what conviction bias is? It is where you only want to hear what you are accustomed hearing and feel a sense of validation in having heard it from someone else. These platforms are not designed for that. We are deeply committed to the proclamation of the truth. And that's a word I want us to hang on to for a little while longer because it's important. Leadershift is committed not to breathing more life into this dead system. We are deeply committed at this point to establish alternatives. And we are moving, please take note of these concepts. We are moving from profundity to authenticity, moving from the frivolous to the serious, from the engineered to the organic, from the nebulous to the obvious. We are no longer genuflecting to incompetence and ineptitude, and we are very deliberate and unapologetic at that in our Christocentric emphasis, meaning that whatever we are doing, it is not the eruption of somebody's ideas. It is not the eruption of some soulish initiative, that this must be a Christocentric initiative that God approves of. We could find principles in the Word of God to validate it, and it carries all of the Christ characteristics embedded in it. So if we are building economies, and if we are engaged in doing social projects, and if we are concerned about building schools and building educational systems, our concern is not just to do it because we want to do it and we have skill sets to get it done. It must be Christocentric in its emphasis. And those things are very, very, very important. That constitutes, in a very simple and succinct manner, what I call just a quick overview of how we are going to define our way forward. Listen, the Leadershift mission, and this is important, the Leadershift mission and mandate is to lead an assault on the provincialism of Christianity. I want you to take note of that term, and if you could write it down, write it down. The Leadershift mission, today's conversation is dealing with the Leadershift ethos going forward. The Leadershift mission and the mandate of this conversation that we have from time to time on a Monday, and more than that is the mandate that I'm engaged in whether I do a meeting anywhere. My mission and the way in which God is calibrating my own understanding and my own spirit, it is to lead an assault on the provincialism of Christianity. Now, what do I mean by the provincialism of Christianity? Let me define the word provincialism, because to some of you it's a big word. But as you know, big words basically are nothing more. If you break it down, you'd realize simple concepts buried inside of it. What do I mean, the provincialism of Christianity? The word provincialism basically means narrow-mindedness. That in this conversation, we are concerned about breaking the narrow-mindedness of Christianity. Now, the reason why you may say, well, Anderson, why did you not just say narrow-mindedness? Because provincialism, while it speaks of narrow-mindedness, it captures other very, very, very important areas that I want you to capture. The Leadershift mission, and if we gather together from time to time and as we branch out into other areas of focused attention like business, entrepreneurship, marketplace, the objective is to lead an assault on the provincialism of Christianity. Provincialism means the narrow-mindedness, the small-mindedness. But listen to what this word also means. This word provincialism, it speaks specifically, or it identifies a certain level of meaningful operation only within the small province, hence provincialism, in the small province. So you could be very specific, you could be very meaningful, you could be very strong, you could be very powerful, you could be very revelational, you could be very gifted, but provincialism basically is that your giftedness, your competence, your intelligence, it only exists within the small province of your little area, but it is generally frowned upon in the broad metropolis of life. Understand me. Provincialism speaks to a certain area of specific and very meaningful operation only in a small province, but it's generally frowned upon in the broad metropolis of life. Let me explain that further, and I'm sure you're understanding where I'm going. This is what I call in-crowd smartness. What is in-crowd smartness? In-crowd smartness is, listen, in other words, in another way to put it is like, listen, in a blind country, a one-eyed man is king. So you stand in a blind community with your own myopic self, but you have more sight than your blind community. In-crowd smartness. Provincialism is where your intelligence and your hooplying and hollering and screaming might work in your church building with your 50 members or 500 members or even 5,000 members. But when you take it out of the small province of your church meeting for 2 hours, you suddenly realize it is irrelevant in the broad metropolis of life. Hence, I said earlier that one of the things that this current situation has forced us all into is to rethink our message and our functionality. And here's a good question. How much of what you do in the small province of your church community will be looked upon as relevant in the broad metropolis of life? How much of how you think, how you function, how you behave, how much of your doctrine, your perspective, your worldview, how much of your sight of God really can bring value and impact in the broad metropolis of life? Or is it only relevant and powerful and strong and anointed in your small province? Provincialism is when you believe you are so effective because you are living in your little fishbowl and you are unaware that there's a vast ocean out there. You know? That's provincialism. You are very effective in your small province, but you are frowned upon in the broad metropolis of life. This is what I said. I call that in-crowd smartness. In-crowd smartness. In-crowd smartness is the sheer ineffectiveness, of taking your in-crowd smartness out in the broad province into the broad and busy metropolis, only for it to be said by nonsense. What we have to do here inside of Leadershift is to create a world in which your province and the communication in your province is as relevant, it is as strong, it is as authentic, it is as needed in the broader metropolis of life, that you cannot be an individual doing your hallelujahs and your amens on a Sunday morning, but it cannot work in the marketplace when you go to the bank on a Monday morning. So we must be able to break that provincialism of Christianity, the small-mindedness of Christianity, the narrow-mindedness, the thing that works very, very effectively in your small province, no matter how big it may appear. Hence, I use words like 500 or 5,000. It is still a small province, but it is frowned upon in the broader metropolis of life. Understand me? So that gives you a sense as to where these conversations must go going forward in Leadershift. Listen to me. Let's talk some more. We have to be deliberate. We have to be very deliberate in building people who can lead models of kingdom entrepreneurship, models of kingdom business, education, finance, kingdom communities, etc. We have to be very deliberate in building people. Observe, I did not say we have to be deliberate in building entrepreneurship and business and education. We have to build people. We are not concerned about building systems. We are more concerned about building people who then will build systems. We are very deliberate in building people. We can't invest our energies in criticizing what exists if we are not prepared to take the bold step, not to speak of what is preferred, but to animate it, build it, and practicalize it. If we're talking about building an alternative economy, let's stop talking about it and let's animate it, let's build it, and let's practicalize it. If we talk about single person economy, let's begin to gather those gifted individuals and really corral them into a certain type of conversation. Break their own provincialism, because even in that world, it has provincialism as well. Break their own provincialism and create a certain kind of buoyant impartational environment that will cause people of that particular ilk not just to talk about alternative economies, but to animate it, build it, and practicalize it. That's where season 4 of this leadership conversation is destined to take us. Listen to me further. Listen, let's talk about these 6 gateway principles. Now hold on to these things, because this meeting this afternoon is more like a it's more like a meeting designed to give us a sight into how we will speak and how we would build going forward. And the reason why it is important is so that when you log into this conversation from time to time, you won't be offended by the direction in which we are going. Because it's easy for sometimes you sit in this meeting and say, boy, look like Anderson want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You have to understand why this meeting is configured. This is not a Bible study. Leadership is not a Bible study. We are not concerned about just talking about nice little biblical little principles and giving you Hebrew and Greek. We'll do that too. But we are trying to drive biblical philosophy and bringing it to the point where it is applied lifestyle, taking doctrine and making it behavior, and allowing behavior to represent doctrine in such a way that the purpose of God is no longer a bunch of nebulous ideas, but it's practical principles that can be hammered out, worked out, looked upon, manifested, and interacted with. Let me give you 6 gateway principles, very important principles that we'll build upon. Again, this is still introductory principles. We're trying to get to that polymathic concept that I think is so important. Let's look at these 6 gateway principles. Number 1, the intergenerational nature of our responsibility. Now, these 6 principles are important because they contribute in no small way to how we will configure our conversations this particular season 4. Remember, we said that we will continue the little hiatus for another 3 weeks or so, and then we'll reconvene. And as we gather together, we will drill more deeply into these gateway concepts and expand on them and bring them into a greater sense of relevance. We will deal with them in such a way that it could apply to all the different streams and all the different functionalities that we will engage in. First principle in these 6 gateway concepts is the intergenerational nature of our responsibility. Listen, we must be very, very, very conscious that what we are called to do in God, we may not necessarily accomplish it in our generation. While we have a certain level of conviction that we may very well be the ultimate generation and that we have been given the baton to finish this race, we are equally deeply concerned and aware of the fact that there is an intergenerational responsibility. And that intergenerational responsibility, it is a combination of us being responsible for those who pass the baton to us, our fathers and those who would have battled before us, and we are equally responsible for those who are coming before us. So it must be a nice, even balance of us as the ultimate generation, the push, the drive, the energy with which you do what you are called to do is important. But at the same time, you must be equally aware of the fact that, listen, there is another generation that we are responsible to invest in so that they can take this beyond where we have taken it. Now, listen to me. The intergenerational responsibility is important. We are living off the labor of those who've gone before us, and we have to celebrate that a lot of things that we've come into, we did not come into it by our own personal discovery. We are living off the labor of those who have gone before us, but we are equally responsible to leave a legacy for those ahead of us. The sad thing is that most people leave legacies that have too much of their own imprint on it. When we talk about leaving a legacy, I am not concerned about building Anderson's brand, and the legacy I'm leaving is making sure that the Anderson's brand exists long after I'm gone. Listen, I don't care about the Anderson's brand. I'm concerned about the kingdom. And so the legacy that I'm concerned about is at least leaving resources impartation, doctrine, material, books, some value system that the next generation can pick up and run with, even if it does not involve building what Anderson built, his organization and his institution and his network. The legacy that we build, and when we talk about building this succession plan inside of our operation, succession planning is not trying to make sure that your organization continues to have life long after you as the leader has died. That is not our concern. Most people are too concerned about building their own legacy and not concerned about building the legacy of the kingdom of God. We are responsible to leave a legacy for those ahead of us. Like David, we have to invest and gather the necessary material, have it all there so that Solomon could take this thing forward. When I talk about the intergenerational nature of our responsibility, that ought to impact upon how we think about what we do. How do we deal with it? We can't be critical of the fathers who have gone before us. Neither can we be condescending with the sons who are there before us. There has to be this dynamic, something that Thamo talks quite a bit about, that family dynamic. And he has a real rich insight into that particular principle. And we're going to talk more about that going forward. But I want you to understand the intergenerational nature of our responsibility. Respect for that which has come before, but be very responsible for what is coming ahead of us. Listen, consider that one generation died in the wilderness in order for another generation to enter. And sometimes we must be willing, like the salmon, to lay our lives down in order to make sure this continues. We must be willing to get out of the way so that the purpose of God continues. You see, in my life, I am not concerned about holding on to my little pet peeves. I am quite prepared to step out of the way so that the purpose of God can move forward. One generation died, and I know that that is not the best example because that generation did not necessarily give their lives. They literally died because of disobedience and because they surrendered the objective of the Lord. But the principle of intergenerationalism is still there, that one generation died in the wilderness in order for another generation to enter into purpose. David desired to build a house, but Solomon did it. This is an important principle. Hear what Hebrews says. God, having provided something better for us, that they should not be made perfect apart from us. Something inside of that talks about the intergenerational nature of our responsibility, because we see it in Abraham. In Hebrews 11, it talks about all the exploits of these heroes of faith. But despite these men, being sawn asunder, despite these men building entities, despite these men discovering dimensions in God, whatever they saw, whatever they built, the Bible says that their work is still incomplete without us. What they did is to leave us a platform that we can effectively engage the purpose of God, and we still have that responsibility. Our work is incomplete without the work done by our fathers, and our work is incomplete without the work that will be completed by our sons and those coming after us. I have an important quote. Write this down because I think it is important. In the kingdom, history is not the past. It is the ever-present, because we carry our history inside of us. History in the kingdom, history is not the past. History is an ever-present, because we carry our history inside of us. In other words, I carry the seed of Abraham deep inside of me. I carry all of Hebrews 11 deep inside of me. It informs my belief system. It informs my thinking system. That is not historical data. That is part of my literal DNA. And if I hold to that principle, then I must be prepared to give of my own DNA so that the intergenerational nature of my responsibility will be effectively passed on. What does that do for you as a leader? What does that say to you and how you build and what you do and how you invest in people? Now, it's important that you understand that most of what we call mentoring is making a person who is a slave to you. We call it mentoring, but the reality is our functionality and the way in which we go about mentoring, it is designed to make that person hook themselves, tether themselves to you for the rest of their life. And that is not mentoring, that is servitude. I call it plantation. And we must be conscious of that, because if we're talking about intergenerational responsibilities, that ought to affect the way we do what we do, how we invest in people. You don't take ownership of anybody. You don't take ownership of anybody's lives or ownership of anybody's calling. We have a responsibility to the investment given to us by our fathers, but we have a responsibility to effectively pass that baton on to another generation. And that's important. Now, remember, I'm just giving you a snapshot. We're going to build on this going forward. Just giving you a snapshot. This issue of the intergenerational nature of our responsibility is something that ought to inform the way we build this leadership going forward. Listen, number 2, 6 gateway principles. The imperative for us to be liberated from the yoke of slavery. Man, we could talk about this from now until eternity. Because, listen, nothing slows us down as a kingdom community more than religion. We have to get rid of that thing in all kinds of ways. Listen, some have effectively broken the chains. There are some people who have effectively broken the chain, but the chaff of the chains remain. Chaff is that thing, you know, like if you have a watch on your hand, the little color that you see left there after you take your watch off, that is an example of chaff in a very small way. That's the most puerile example of it. The chaff is the burning, the pain, the marks, the bruises left after the chains are gone. So some of us, the chains are gone. We've been effective in getting rid of the chains, but the chaff of the chains remain, leaving a reflexive deference to patterns that have long since lost their relevance. So yes, well, I'm no longer religious. I hate religion, but the chaff of the chains are still there, that you find yourself still subscribing to a religious model in the way you do what you do, the way you handle the word of God, the way you handle your people, all of the protocols, all of the rules, all of the control, the pyramidic forms. We have to be so deliberate that we liberate ourselves from the yoke of religion. Listen to me again. Some have been very effective in breaking the chains, but the chaff of the chains remain. I want you to go and get some cocoa butter, get some healing, get rid of the very image or the very appearance of you having once been chained, once having been held captive, not just to religion, but to anything and everything. Deal with those issues that are seeking to imprison your existence. Get rid of both the chain and the chaff. Get rid of the chains and the chaff. The very memory of the thing has to go. And that's important. I'm saying a lot more than you think I'm saying, but it's important that I, Anderson Williams, get rid of both the chains and the chaff, because I do not intend to live reflexively deferring to patterns that once defined me, but are very irrelevant for where I currently exist. Listen, most people find themselves thinking, building, having a worldview, having a God perspective that is only seen through the myopic and frosted lens of religion. I mean, you listen to their conversation, you listen to how they shape things, how they define things, because their whole perspective is shaped through the myopic and frosted lens of religion. Man, I want us in this conversation, particularly in season 4 of this leadership, to deal with those issues, both the chains and the chaff. How do I define religion? You must have heard me say this before. Religion is a placebo, pretending to be a panacea, attempting to cure a disease that it consistently contributes to create. And so you are in a constant cycle. You're trying to address a problem that the very religion is creating. The thing is a placebo. It is a salt tablet pretending to be a cure-all, only trying to fix a problem that it is constantly creating. I have always described this. Religion is the Christian's kryptonite. Nothing imperils your walk in God more than religion. The thing messes you up on all kinds of levels. And so what I want us to do in this season 2 is to go back to this crippling component called religion, because we must have a people truly liberated to build in the marketplace, to build in our world, to build in governments, to build in politics, to build in schools, without this complete weight of religion loading us down and affecting the effectiveness of our operation. That's the next principle. Principle number 3. These are gateway principles. Principle number 3. In an environment where mendacity is lies and fables and deception, in an environment where mendacity, post-truth, and conspiracy theories are the currency in an escalating crisis, speaking the truth is now revolutionary. Let me say it again. That could be a nice tweet. In an environment where mendacity, post-truth, and conspiracy theories are the currency in an escalating crisis, and that crisis is bigger than the US political environment. That crisis is bigger than COVID. That crisis is deep inside of the corridors of the church and inside of apostolic networks and leaders who continue to propagate a false principle, and everybody's rallying around personalities and defining their organization according to a strong personality. Listen, we are deep in the bowels of mendacity, deep in the bowels of post-truth, deep in the clutches of conspiracy theories, and that's the currency in an escalating crisis. In that environment, speaking the truth is revolutionary. And that's a very important point I want you to understand. Speaking the truth is now revolutionary. When I talk about speaking the truth, I'm not just talking about truthfulness flowing out of your own existence. I'm not just talking about your ability to speak truthfully on all matters, but I'm talking about speaking the truth, the word of God, unadulterated in its content, where it's not discombobulated with your own opinions and messed up with your own narcissistic disposition, completely messed up with your solipsistic mindsets. I'm not describing that. That is not the truth. Because once you begin to mingle the purity of the truth of God with your opinions, with your cultural notions, that is no longer the truth. That is just another little, as we say in Trinidad, a little callaloo that really has no real flavor to it. I'm going to say it again. Principle number 3, in an environment where mendacity, post-truth, and conspiracy theories are the currency in an escalating crisis, speaking the truth is now revolutionary. And if you're a leader, I commend you. You speak the truth. Don't bring your own human philosophies upon that. Don't layer that with all kinds of opinions. Don't layer that with your own doctrinal and denominational mindsets. Don't layer that with your blackness. Don't layer that with your whiteness. Don't layer that with the pigmentation of your skin. Don't layer that by the crises that you are living out of. Speaking the truth is revolutionary. Truth is not subject to our opinions. It's not subject to our opinions. Our opinions must defer to truth. Truth will insult your intelligence. It will expose your motives, and it will lay bare your deficiencies. That's truth. Truth is not subject to your opinion. Truth will insult your intelligence. Truth will expose your motives and lay bare your deficiencies. Truth will affirm your accuracy and give push power to your correctness. You know, like Joseph down in Egypt, it says the word of the Lord proved him true. The word of the Lord proved him true. The Bible does not say he was true to the word. The word of the Lord proved him true. Truth affirmed his accuracy, and it gave him push power in his correctness. In other words, if you hold to truth in your heart by the power of the Spirit, the word of God will validate that and provide push power in your going forward. Truth will affirm your accuracy. For us in this conversation and going forward, we're going to spend some time going back to this essence of the truth. Truth must be prized over ego, must be pursued to your own hurt, and must be celebrated as the true prize, must be celebrated as the true prize. And we're going after that in this conversation. Christ is truth personified. And so we'll have a lot of conversation about this Christ characteristic. We had some of it last conversation in season 3, but we're going to drill into that even more this season because it is important that we get back to this. And in talking about that, let me kind of make this one point. I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself, but I need to make this point very clear. It is important that we do not run after like truth, or run after principles and notions, assuming that that is the ultimate panacea that will open up portals and bring us into the greatest expression of our lives and our experience in God. We need to just pursue wisdom. Wisdom is the principal thing. I want you to hold that in your heart, because it's something we're going to get back to. Because when we get down to this issue of truth, Christ is truth personified. We have to get back to that principal thing. Wisdom is the principal thing. And before we are done this afternoon, we're going to get to the significance of that issue. This season of leadership, we are dealing with the issue of truth. Truth is now revolutionary, because we are deep in the bowels of mendacity, post-truth, conspiracy theories, and the like. We are getting back to the issue of truth. Principle number 4. We have to be mindful of two extremities, of two extremes. As we build into season 4 of leadership, we have to be conscious of two very important extremities. Now understand again, that as we examine these principles, we are not just talking in a nebulous way about leadership, but we are equally describing your life, because all truth is like a funnel. It has a narrow part that applies to your life and a broad part that applies to everybody else's lives, organizationally and otherwise. So while we're talking about leadership, please understand that in your own life, you need to get back to understanding and declaring and speaking the truth. Now, here's another one. You have to be mindful of two extremes. Extreme number 1, what I call the light switch mindset, the search for quick results. It is important that if we're talking about taking things out of the nebulous into the obvious, being deliberate in building things so that it could be seen, it could be touched, it can be manifested, we have to be careful and balance that, because we don't want people to run recklessly and wild, thinking, well, now that we're going to build things and we're moving from the nebulous to the obvious, that you run out there wild and crazy and just start to build some force-ripe systems and structures. No. We have to be careful of what I call the light switch mindset. You flick a switch and things come on. The search for quick results. Listen, even when you are well informed and you assume that you have knowledge, you cannot bulldoze your way into purpose. Even when you are well informed, even when you are convinced you have the knowledge, you have the relationships, you have the know-how, you cannot bulldoze your way into purpose. The light switch mindset is one that basically tells you I have the right to bulldoze my way into purpose. The search for quick results will always result in bending the rules, compromising the standards. We have to be careful, because we have to be able to provide the correct balance in doctrine, in relationships, in impartation, in advice, in consultancy. We must bring proper balance, that the right to do does not authorize you to do it. The freedom to do, the knowledge to do, does not legitimize you doing it. The search for quick results will always result in bending the rules and compromising the standards. Listen, even when you are well informed, you cannot assume bull in a China shop status. Even when you're well informed, you seem to know exactly what you need to do. Remember the Davidic principle. Even when he won a significant battle and he is thrown back into the same battle with the same enemy, he did not assume that I could just utilize what I did in the previous battle and just win this one. Listen, even when you are well informed, even when you have the experience, you don't ever assume bull in China shop status. We would listen, we'll obey, and we'll act at the right time. Here's this interesting scripture. Everything is made beautiful in its time. Things are not made beautiful based on your knowledge. Things are not made beautiful based on when you think you need to act. Everything is made beautiful in its time. One of the two extremes that we need to manage in going forward is we have to watch out for the light switch mindset, the search for quick results. And that happens not just for leaders who just wants to get it done, but it happens also in the lives of members. Members basically assume that because my leader sat down and heard a certain truth, that truth that the leader heard, he must now immediately step into it. And so we have members in churches and communities who are judging their leaders based on this same light switch mindset. You sat and you heard a principle for the first time, just as your leader might be hearing it for the first time, but you assume that having heard is enough for them to apply. You have to be careful and don't subject your leaders and your friends and your neighbors to the light switch mindset. Second part of that, what I call the hustle culture. We have to be conscious of the hustle culture. Now remember, hear me again, that in this meeting, I am not saying everything, but I want you to capture the many nuance. There's a lot of nuance I'm trying to communicate. So there's things I'm not saying that I'm hoping that you hear and that you understand and you capture. Second principle in these two extremes that we must be conscious of is what I call the hustle culture. The hustle culture is where we become encumbered by much doing and much activity. So on the one hand, we have this light switch mindset. On the other hand, we have the hustle culture where we have to be always doing, always in a meeting. Have you ever seen leaders? You have 5 members in your church. Sorry, it's not being derogatory. I'm not intending to be derogatory, but you have 5 members in your church, but you are extremely busy. I mean, you could hardly get time to sit down and relax. One of the things I've learned over the last 2 years, and having to spend so much time horizontal and being used as a pincushion, needles all the time. One of the things I've learned, listen, learn to enjoy a moment to breathe, where you could listen to your own thoughts, where you could think. Don't be so busy and running back and forth and living in that hustle culture. Listen, that thing really doesn't do much, it deceives everybody into believing things happening and nothing going on. This is a space where we confuse busyness in kingdom work with competence in kingdom ways. There is this space where people confuse busyness in kingdom work. Well, I have to travel tomorrow, I have to go to Australia Monday, and I'll be in another conference this afternoon. Listen, don't confuse busyness in kingdom work with competence in kingdom ways. Intimacy with the Lord must continue to be a high priority in all of our efforts, and we're going to drill into that again in this season of leadership. Listen to this scripture that you know, Luke chapter 10, 38 to 42, King James translation. It says, "Now it came to pass, as they went, that he entered into a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha received him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who also sat at Jesus's feet and heard his word." Listen to that. Sat at Jesus's feet and heard his word. Martha, however, was cumbered about much serving and came to him and said, "Lord, doth thou," we are the King James here, "doth thou not care that my sister hath left me to serve alone? Bid her therefore that she helps me." And Jesus answered and said unto her, "Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things, but one thing is needful. One thing is needful, and Mary has chosen that good part which shall not be taken away from her." Take note of 2 words there. 2 words. Word number 1, it says Mary sat, heard, while Martha was cumbered. That word sat is the word parakathizo. Parakathizo. And the word means to position oneself near another. It is not just an arbitrary sitting down, but note what is important. And we don't want to become so deeply philosophical that we lose the basic premise of truth, right? That what we want is not to invade and decode and look at all these subtexts in scriptures and have all of these profound ideas. And at the end of the day, we miss out on the important issues. What is most important to God? To position oneself near to another. And that other happens to be the Lord. To position yourself near to another. Parakathizo means to draw close, to sit beside. And the emphasis in this word is proximity. Whatever we do, however we do it, I want you to understand that in season 4 of Leadership, we are deeply concerned about executing, but we are equally deeply concerned about proximity with God. The emphasis here is proximity. Parakathizo deals with issues of proximity. Mary did not just arbitrarily sit She was positioning herself near. She was drawing close, sitting beside, and she was engaged in a proximate relationship. The word heard is the word akouo in the Greek. And the word akouo means to yield obedience to the voice. This word carries the idea of almost cupping your ear to cut out all of the ambient noise and other disturbing noises in order to effectively and carefully hear. The word means to hear attentively, to learn by hearing. Akouo, the word means to examine thoroughly, to understand and to comprehend. Listen, I want you to grab those two words because this is what Jesus identifies as the primary thing. She has chosen the nobler of all the actions. So while we talk about the need for us to execute and build and do what we must, we are not engaged in a reckless pursuit of just building things for the sake of having it built. We are deeply concerned about parakathizo, and we are deeply concerned about akouo. We are not just concerned about doing, we are deeply concerned about proximity, and we are equally concerned about examining the voice of God thoroughly, being obedient to that voice. Listen, on the other end, Martha was just cumbered. That word cumbered is the Greek word parispu. And listen to what this word means. This word means to draw different ways at the same time, to be pulled in different areas all at the same time, to be pulled in all kinds of different ways, to draw away in the mind, to be distracted with cares and responsibilities, to be overburdened by various distractions, to be overoccupied with a thing, to be driven about mentally, to busy oneself. Observe, instead of all of these definitions, the emphasis is not on a multitude of work, but the emphasis here is on mental drift, distractions, detours, and deviations. And all that we're doing, there's something specific to what God called us to do. And we must be careful not to be pulled into all kinds of different areas of emphasis. Some of them are good, but they are not configured for what God is calling you into. We celebrate what they're doing. I still want to know what they're doing. I'm very open to sitting in conferences and being a part of what other guys are saying and doing, particularly guys I have a lot of respect and regard for based on my knowledge of them, and over the years I've walked with them. But at the same time, I could applaud their efforts, very much like the 7 churches in Revelation. Each church had a responsibility to follow through on what God told them, but every church equally had a responsibility to hear what God was saying to the other churches. Whenever you build systems that are so exclusive that you can only hear yourself, you have built an anti-Christ model. The model in Revelations is this: you have to hear what God is saying to the other churches. It is my responsibility to hear what God is saying to the brothers in South Africa. It is my responsibility to hear what God is saying to the brothers in Ukraine, in Africa, in Nigeria. My responsibility. While I remain very loyal and committed to what God is saying to me, I won't be drawn and pulled in every which direction. It is important that I hear what God is saying to them as well. Principle, right? Very important. Next principle that we are dealing with, I'm just going to highlight these last two and get into the next point in my agenda. These are 6 gateway principles that we are identifying. Principle number 5, listen to me, very important. The pulsing core of the kingdom is not dominance. See, we assume that the kingdom is to take over and just kind of, we're going to take over politics because that's the kingdom. We're going to take over business because that's the kingdom. We're going to take over the dance and arts. So listen, the pulsating core of the kingdom is not dominance. It's not dominance. While the church has held on to dominance as the primary component of the kingdom, most of what they call dominance is just pure bluster. They have done nothing. And if you go back to the Genesis principle, dominance was not the primary component. Let us make man, and let that man be in our image and after our own likeness, and let them have dominion. Dominion was an outflow of being correctly configured. Dominion was an outflow of living by a certain design. Let them have dominion, but let us make man in our image after our own likeness. The things that were important was the image and likeness. The dominion was an outflow of all of that. So we have to understand in season 4 of Leadershift that the pulsing core of the kingdom is not dominance. It is his immanence, meaning his dominion, his superiority, his sovereignty at the core of the kingdom. We cannot talk kingdom and ignore the fact that he is the centerpiece of the kingdom. Without a king, you have no kingdom. At the core of the kingdom, the pulsing core of the kingdom is his eminence. And with that is this dynamic mixture of acquiescence. Acquiescence is where the kingdom will not bulldoze its way into your life. It won't offend you and overrule your will. It must be welcome. The kingdom must be welcomed. Acquiescence, we welcome it. We yield to it. We say yes to it. At the heart of the kingdom is his eminence, but there's also this dynamic mix of alliance. My relating to you, you and I connecting together. That's a very important part of kingdom dynamic. At the heart of the kingdom is also that dynamic element of deference. We have to yield to God and yield to his rule and yield to his principles. There's also that issue of eminence. Now, there's a difference between immanence and eminence. Eminence is that issue of building from the core of your existence, from the internal landscape of your life, where you are aware of your identity, you know of your sonship status, you know who you are in God, you know how to manicure the internal landscape of your life. That is eminence, and that's an important component of kingdom life. And last, and by no means least, obedience. Get this point. The pulsing core of the kingdom is not dominance. It is eminence and the dynamic mix of acquiescence, alliance, deference, immanence, and obedience. That's an important principle. But only if you drill into each one, you suddenly realize the multi-layeredness of correct kingdom life. The pulsing core of the kingdom is not dominion, it's not dominance. We're going to get back to these issues because kingdom is an important part of this whole emphasis. And you'd realize, again, a lot of nuance there, because sonship is a critical part. And where do we cover that? Inside of immanence, where you have to know the internal shape of your life. You have to know who you are, must be convinced of your identity and your status within the precincts of the kingdom. That's the fifth gateway principle inside of Leadershift Season 4. Last gateway principle is, listen, faith must be practicalized. If not, we are no more than armchair critics and shadow generals. If we don't practicalize this, we'll become armchair apostles. What is an armchair apostles? You know, all the biblical concepts from just a wonderful little theoretical perspective. You could quote every scripture, give me all the Greek, all the Hebrew, and you could tell me exactly what the Bible says, but you're building nothing. That's an armchair apostle. You know all the concepts, but you're building nothing. Faith without works is dead. Faith must be practicalized. If not, we are no more than armchair apostles or armchair critics or chateau generals. Who is a chateau general? Back in the days of the war, in France, you had these chateau generals. They would live in their nice palatial buildings, far removed from the battle. But in their comfort zone where they're having their steak and their filet mignon and their nice Beaujolais wines and all of their hors d'oeuvres and whatever else, they are giving instructions to the men who are out in the middle of the battle. And very often the instructions given by the chateau generals really was not appropriate for the people in the battle because the chateau generals are ill aware of what the battle line looks like. And so if you are not practicalizing your faith, then all you are engaged in is being an armchair critic, or you are chateau general. In us building Leadershift and all the many persons who would stream into this and other conversations, we have to be very careful that we are not lost in a world of just knowing all of the nebulous concepts, knowing all of the profound ideas. As I said earlier, we are moving from profundity to authenticity. And you realize how all of these dots are connecting. We are not concerned about merely criticizing. Listen, it is not beneficial to waste your days, your messages by pointing a finger, condemning, criticizing, castigating, and showing all the flaws inside of the efforts of others if you cannot build something that models the correctness of what you believe ought to be built. We are concerned about practicalizing. But practicalizing is a very critical thing. When the Bible says faith without works is dead, show me your faith, I'll show you my works. It's interesting. Go back and look at the word in the Greek, poietes, very interesting word from which you get the English word poet and poetry. The ancient poets were very, very interesting people because they were the people who were involved in drama and theater. Theater back in ancient times really had two dynamic components. It had the hypocrites. The hypocrites, they were those who would more or less put on a performance that was not consistent with their true selves. That's an actor. And if you look at Hollywood, Hollywood is populated with hypocrites. They put on a performance that is inconsistent with their true nature. And the others who would be engaged in theater would be the poietes. The poietes were those who lived by certain rules and that governed their practices. They were the ones who would be involved in opera, the equivalent of our present day opera, where they will paint their face in a certain color. And after a while, you see a man with a white face, but after a while, they begin to embody the character that they are portraying, that you in the audience no longer see a white face, you see a character protruding out of that little mask they have on. And those persons were called poietes. They were not just arbitrary performers. They took on, they embodied the thing that they were seeking to materialize. And that's the word that Paul used to say, listen, you show me faith, I'm going to show you works. I'm going to show you how this thing works. I'm going to show you how this works. And so if you have to practicalize this, we have to go after certain rules. We have to embody the things that we are talking about. We have to represent it and don't just articulate it. We have to represent it. That's important. Faith must be practicalized. Those are the 6 gateway principles. And gateway meaning that we're going to build on that, expand on that, explore it, and open up all of the different portals inside of these 6 principles. Now, let's get to this point, principles of polymathic power. We may stop on this or stop somewhere midpoint of this because I don't want to abuse your time. We normally hold Leadershift according to specific time. It starts at 8 p.m. Kenyan time, East African time, and we normally end at 10 o'clock Kenyan time, which is 1 p.m. Eastern Standard, and we end at 3. So we have about half hour to drill this point in. But maybe at the end, while we are not opening up for much questions, I want to just have maybe about 2 persons to throw something back at me based on what they've heard. Let me get into this point called what I call the principle of polymathic power. Listen to me and listen to me well. In order to look at this, I need to look at one important scripture. Listen to me. This is Ephesians 6 and verse 4. We are looking at principles of polymathic power. Remember, I defined what polymath is. Polymath is a person who is multi-gifted. They are as competent in politics as they are in sports. They are as efficient in literature as they are in a basic skill of their hand. They could build furniture as effectively as they could communicate philosophy. That's a polymath. They are multi-gifted, multi-gifted. And so we are looking at the principle for polymathic power. Listen, and ye fathers, I'm going to go back to King James here. Got to do a little King James every now and again. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. You'd realize in this scripture on the screen that nurture is bold, very important word. And ye fathers. Now, fathers could go in all kind of different areas. Fathers can speak to leadership. Fathers could speak to apostolic leaders. Fathers can speak to physical fathers in a home. Fathers have all kind of stuff behind it. It represents the family structure, very important. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. Let me quote the same scripture for you in the Amplified Translation. And listen, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. Do not exasperate them to the point of resentment with demands that are trivial or unreasonable or humiliating or abusive, not by showing favoritism or indifference to any of them, but bring them up in the tenderly with love it, bring them up tenderly with loving kindness in the discipline. That word discipline I have bold as well. bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Now, that's a really interesting scripture. It's interesting for all kinds of reasons, because in the scripture, Paul introduced his listeners to a word he never used before. Never, ever used the word before. Now, I want you to break this one scripture down and understand something quite simple but important. From Paul's perspective, leadership can be one way. Let's see one of the ways in which leadership can express. Leadership meaning fathers, mentors, it could be CEOs, governors, etc. Leadership can express themselves in several ways. Now, leadership could be exasperating to the point it creates resentment. Now, you could lead people like that, and you'd understand that there is a hemorrhage. I've been talking about this hemorrhage inside of the corridors of Christianity for years. People are leaving the church, but not leaving God. They have identified themselves as doners. They are done. They are done with church. They're no longer committing themselves to the hamster wheel of Sunday after Sunday. All over the world, millions of people are leaving the church in droves, because what is happening is that they have seen within the structure of the church a leadership model that is exasperating to the point it creates resentment. I don't want this no more. How many people have you met saying those words? It is exasperating to the point it creates resentment. From Paul's perspective, leadership can come with demands that are trivial and unreasonable. Trivial and unreasonable. That's what the Amplified Translation says. Listen, fathers, don't put demands on your people that are trivial and unreasonable. You can't go and listen to nobody else. You have to listen to me alone. You are not allowed to leave this church unless I allow you to go. Only with my blessing can you leave. You would not, that is, listen, trivial and unreasonable. Leadership can come with demands that are trivial and unreasonable. Leadership can be humiliating and abusive. Now that's Paul. Listen, the Amplified said, fathers, don't humiliate your children and abuse them. From Paul's perspective, leadership can show favoritism and it can be very indifferent. Now remember that, huh? Let me go back, just in case you don't, just in case you did not see it, I'm going to go back and read it again. Read it again because I think it is critically important that you see what I am talking about. Listen, this is Paul. Amplified Translation. Fathers, don't provoke your children to anger. Don't exasperate them to the point of resentment with demands that are trivial and unreasonable, humiliating and abusive, not by showing favoritism and indifference to any of them, but bring them up in a tender and loving kindness in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. The point I'm making is very simple. From Paul's perspective, you as a leader can be exasperating to the point that it creates resentment. People no longer want to come back to your church. They can't take it anymore. Or leadership can come with demands that are trivial and unreasonable. Leadership can be humiliating and abusive. Leadership can show favoritism and indifference. Now that there, in no small way, defines how most organizations, apostolic networks exist. There are many apostles who run around the earth who are demonstrating by their functionality those four distorted models of fathering and leadership, exasperating their members to the point of resentment. I mean, coming with demands that are trivial and unreasonable, humiliating and abusive, and show favoritism and indifference. You'll be amazed to know how these things work, right? Unfortunately, as I said, all of these point to the current model of Christianity and church. Hence, there is this hemorrhaging taking place across the world. People no longer want that. Now, listen, the antithesis of this faulty model is nurturing. Paul's position is, don't do this, but rather. Don't do this, but rather. Do not operate like this, but rather. Now, let's look at the but rather. That's an important word. That word nurturing is an interesting word. Paideia. Paideia. I want you to kind of fall in love with this word because this word is seriously critical. And in us building forward, we're going to examine this word paideia. Now, let me start by saying this, that our time is running out and we do need to get a couple feedback. Among the Greeks prided themselves in being the best, the most advanced. They were the ones who provided models to society and the world. The Greek gave us models in banking, gave us models in politics and democracy. They gave us models in education. They gave us models in all kinds of ways. Even most of their myth, most of Greek mythology continues to project this sense of strength, Hercules, strength of dominance, showing dominance, because the Greeks prided themselves in being the best, the most dominant, the most advanced, the most marvelous. They were pioneers in all kinds of areas. Take note of all of that. The thing that informed or led to Greece being so dominant in so many areas is that one word, paideia. That one word. Because the word, when Paul pulled this word in, introduced it to his audience for the first time, he is about to explore something, about to identify something that is highly critical, that will become the very primary expression of this leadership platform going forward. I want you to fall in love with this word, paideia. The thing about this paideia, I'm sure all of you, years ago, or even now, you are familiar with the word encyclopedia. And remember, I kept talking about the need for us to be polymathic and multi-gifted. When you think about an encyclopedia, what do you think about? The multi-dimensional, multi-diverse, multi-layered dimensions of competence and skills and abilities, all that stuff going out there. Now, hear me again. Among the Greeks, they had two systems of learning. They had a system called techne, that deals with just practical skills. Techne was the way in which the Greeks will train the masses or the commoners. The average man on the street will go through an educational system called techne. Sad to say, most of the world's current educational model is patterned after techne. It's like a factory. People go through there and they're not allowed to think. They just kind of regurgitate whatever is said to them. So if I tell you, listen, by the mountain has a tree, tell me what is by the mountain. It has a tree, miss. So you would never say, well, maybe the mountain also has large trees and maybe shrubs, but you just kind of regurgitate, and it's all based on memory. And we don't really train a student to be a man. We just train a student to pass an exam, because we are dealing with a factory model that the Greeks had built into their system called techne, that was designed for the commoners, the masses. However, that word paideia was reserved for the aristocrats. The aristocrats would be exposed to a certain level of education called paideia. So among the Greeks, it had education and paideia. Among the Greeks, it had learning and paideia. In other words, what we want in this conversation here out of Kenya every Monday is to amp up the conversation, paideia. Because paideia was the way in which the Greeks would more or less make sure that the aristocrats are multi-gifted, multi-learned, multi-skilled, multi-aware, that they could build business as effectively as they could lead a church. They can speak with great authority and principles of truth as effectively as they can speak into philosophies. Now, this is what really informed the philosophers in the days of the Greeks. And don't get all tied up with the word philosophy. The word philosophy comes from two words, philos, sophia. Philos means love for, sophia means wisdom. The philosophers are nothing more than men who are lovers of wisdom. The word paideia was the driving force behind all of the great Greek philosophers, because it informed the nature of their teaching. It equally informed the nature of the students listening. It informed the nature of the training. It informed the nature of the mentoring. It informed the nature of the empowering. This is like an explosive word that Paul suddenly introduced to the Ephesian church. He said, listen, fathers, don't provoke your children. Shift gears. The opposite to that kind of manipulative, controlling, putting demands on people that are trivial and onerous. Don't do that. Church in its correct manner cannot be effectively built by that model. What you have to do is up the standard, amp up the thing and get into this area called paideia, a different level altogether. Let me tell you basic meanings because time is running away. Paideia. Paideia dealt with learning from childhood to greatness. Learning from childhood to greatness, which inspires the recipient with passionate and ardent desire to become a perfect citizen. I love it. Because once you start dealing with paideia, we're dealing with issues of kingdom civics. Civics, how do you live as a citizen within the kingdom? Not by memorizing scriptures. Have you realized how outdated it is for you to tell a child, well, it has 66 books in the Bible, and after Matthew comes Mark and John and this guy. Listen, you have a computer now, just type a few words in and there it is. I mean, listen, you do not create a perfect kingdom citizen by looking at a whole bunch of non-essentials. Something about Christianity and the way in which we talked about the kingdom and the reason why we still walked away with this Paris syndrome, it's because we missed a very important issue. We've been doing technical teaching to the masses, and we have not concerned ourselves like the ancient philosophers being concerned about paideia. You see the difference between techne will take a multitude. And what techne will do is just create a cookie cut because techne was concerned in mimicking, was concerned about mimicking. So I am the artisan, watch me and become like me. That's what most of our churches do. We still basically leading based on the Greeks' concept of training the commoner. Paideia was concerned about autonomous building. You must become who you must become, even if it means that you're no longer a member of my church, even if you're no longer a member of my network. Paideia was not concerned about ownership. Paideia was concerned about autonomous empowering. I will empower you even if I don't ever see you again, even if you don't ever have to be a part of my organization. Paideia, learning from childhood to greatness, where the recipient is inspired with passionate and ardent desire to become a perfect citizen, knowing both how to wield and how to submit to righteous rule. Paideia. And that's the image that Paul brought here in Ephesus. Listen to me some more. This word paideia, the goal of paideia is to create a perfect citizen. Once you talk about kingdom and you talk about ecclesia, you can't have those conversations and not have this issue of paideia, because paideia was not concerned about masses. Techne is concerned about masses. You're a pastor and all you're thinking about is having a big church with plenty of people. You're still living out of a techne zone. You are living in a techne matrix. Paideia, the ancient philosophers will have no more than 5 students. I'm not saying you should have 5 members, but look at the concentrated concern in bringing this youngster to a place where he is the perfect citizen, contributing to the greatness of Greece, contributing to the dominance of this society, contributing to the preeminence, to the creativity, to the magnificence of this society. This was their technology. Paideia. For the Greeks, paideia was not just education, it was a moral obligation to the community. Paideia was a moral obligation to the community. The life of the community and paideia were inextricably linked. Listen to me further. Paideia was deep learning and education that allows for constant inquiry, because this was not where you sit there, I tell you, and you walk away. That's the model we have. Paideia, 5 of you in front of me, I could tell you a whole bunch of stuff and you could ask questions like Jesus going into the temple and having a dialogue with the philosophers. This is not where the average preacher goes out there and say, I want to tell you today that Jesus Christ is, and you go through all this kind of asthmatic kind of preaching, and then the people just have to walk away and shake their head and good message, Pastor. I'm talking about learning and education that allows for constant inquiry. The way we have done it here on this platform and the way we do it on most platforms, inquiry. Paideia was the absolute opposite of what I call cheap learning. Cheap learning, the opposite of cheap learning. This was the system of learning that was reserved for the aristocrats. Now, when I say aristocrats, please understand, I'm not describing a class system among us here. In Rome, it was a class issue. For us, listen, every single one of us happened to be an aristocrat in that regard. When Paul spoke to the church in Corinth, he said, listen, when there's envy and jealousy among you, you are behaving like mere men. Paraphrase, you are behaving like the average commoner. You're an aristocrat. You stand taller. You know more. God has invested more in you. This was the system of learning reserved for the aristocrat, to make them polymathic as much as possible. Paideia did not concern itself with acceptable deodorized discourse that was palatable to the hearer. Now I say that, and I put that note in there deliberately. Why? Because you may come on this platform and you may not necessarily have wonderful deodorized discourse. Every now and again, I might offend you by what I say and how I say it. I'm not deliberately setting out to offend you, but what I want you to understand that if we are building a system here that is designed to create polymaths, that people here must be effective in building institutions and building schools and building organizations and building marketplace businesses, we are not concerned about deodorized discourses that's palatable to the hearer. And if we are concerned about truth, that's important. Every single block we placed here, we placed it deliberately. Truth will insult your intelligence. And if we speak the truth and you are offended by it, I hold no apology for you. If you're offended by the truth, I am very careful about what I say and be very deliberate in saying it as best as I can in a non-offensive way. Paideia did not concern itself with acceptable deodorized discourse. This was deep, provocative discourse that always allowed the hearer to think again, reconsider current action, reconsider consequences, and be more deliberate in setting in motion a system of thought and action with a short domino effect. Paideia. Listen, this was supposed to be the point that I was supposed to spend all of my time on. However, because of time, I'm going to leave it right there. You know, I used to be a disc jockey when I was younger. And being a disc jockey also informed my role as a worship leader when I was a worship leader. I always had this thing, always leave people wanting more than leaving them saying I had enough. So I'm going to leave you right here with this paideia. This is an explosive concept because this is the platform that determines how effective bankers will get into their business and be successful. Paideia. This is a principle I want us to explore. Paul introduced this concept to the church in Ephesus as the opposite to abusive, dysfunctional, extreme leadership that was more concerned about parroting another message on a Sunday morning, but not necessarily concerned about bringing their people from smallness to greatness. We are not in that particular zone anymore. We ain't doing the technique thing. When we get back together, I was actually tempted to say, let's have a second part to this introduction, but I won't do that. I'm going to stop right here because listen, I have about 18 other slides in this presentation drilling into the issue of paideia and getting into the other issues of speaking truth to power. This was supposed to be an introductory conversation today, creating a platform for us to build going forward. But what I want us to think about as we redesign and as we look at Leadership Season 4, what we are concerned about is trying to make a company of polymaths. And if we say the kingdom, for the Greeks, Greece was the most dominant society. What Greece don't know is that, listen, the kingdom is the most dominant society. And the principles that the Greeks understood, Paul borrowed this concept, just as Jesus borrowed the concept of ecclesia. Paul borrowed this concept from the Greeks for us to understand, listen, we ain't concerned about preaching anymore. We're concerned about paideia. We're not concerned about just hollering and screaming because that's the kind of stuff that get our sons frustrated and they want no more. Paideia. Practical, serious principle that will inform the nature of our building in Season 4 of this leadership. On that note, it's now 8 minutes to 3. I'm going to stop here and let's open up the lines for a couple people to make a few interjections. Very short. We don't want a long discourse. As a matter of fact, I would like to throw a couple people out at you before we go. Some of the usual suspects I want to call out, right? Usual suspect. Before we go, we have a few minutes. I see Dr. Morgan, Peter Morgan. You know that I'll definitely call on you here, right? Dr. Morgan, Peter Morgan. Doc, can I kind of give us a little sense as to how this landed? Pete, you there? Is he there? Okay, I don't think, maybe Peter is not, maybe his computer is on. Pat, are you there? Mama Pat, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Where's the bishop?
I am going to track him down. He left here to listen to you all by himself.
Oh, he went to listen, oh, he didn't want to share the moment with you. Look at that.
No, we couldn't share. He's asking for you to respond.
Come in paradise? All right.
He's right here then.
Yep.
But while he gathers his thoughts, I'm happy to hear all of this because I am called Mama by a group of very gifted persons who want to become not like what they knew, what their fathers were, but who want to radically shape and change their world now. And these are the brightest and the best, the cream of the crop. And they will not just succumb themselves to being mere men. In fact, one young man said 2 days ago that he went to a private school. And while he was just taught the mere facts of how to survive, there were people in that private school who were getting the kind of paidetic information and teaching because they left that private school to go and rule kingdoms in Saudi Arabia and in other places. So it's all a matter of what our expectations are and how much are we prepared just to preach on a Sunday rather than shape systems and leaders and nations.
Good.
Yeah, I didn't want to.
The doc is there, Pete? Okay, Peter's not there. Then let me turn. Our time is up, guys. Let me turn over to Charles. Maybe you could. Oh, Peter's just turned on. Yeah, Peter.
Yes, I was just going to say I didn't want to interfere with your train of thought. It was so excellent and so well presented. But there are two of the six points that you made when you were talking there about the intergenerational nature of our responsibility. That's one that we often ignore. We even as leaders, we think it's all about us. But if it doesn't have an intergenerational focus, then the value of our life is not enough to bring transformation. And I think that is very, very critical because it does take generations to change with sustainable effect. The other one that is most remarkable is the number 5 principle there. I tell you, when you see me take notes, you know that it means something. Our role really is not to dominate, but as God said, let us make man and let us make them in our image and let them have dominion. So it is really our responsibility when we are moving into transformational thinking to bring those that we are impacting, bring them into the image of what we represent, and not to dominate them, but rather to ensure that they in fact come into who they are made to be, sons of God. And I like all your statements about, imminence and eminence and all of those kind of stuff. That to me was the single most significant thought, at least for me, And I will really trumpet that one out very, very much, because when we go into, for example, we work in the inner cities, and we think that we must go and take over, but it's not really for us to take over, because there are men in those and leaders in there. When we overthrow them, we ourselves might be overthrown. What we need to do is to recognize that they have a passion and they have already been in position, but they may not have the proper message and the proper values and the proper. What we must do is to give them the proper perspectives and let them continue to lead. You know, Jesus said that we must become salt, we must become light. We're yeast, you know, so it's not for us necessarily to go in there and take over, but rather to bring the image of Christ into leadership that is there, that succeeds us. And there's so much. Time has gone. I think that this message today is an excellent presentation that I will want to listen to over and over again.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, always good hearing Dr. Morgan on this platform. Let me, Charles, let me turn over to you. I'm sure that if we open up this line, if you open up the line, a lot of persons will have to jump in there and make some comments. But guys, today was just supposed to be an introduction to conversations we'll build upon. Paideia would have been my primary concern in building into season 4 of Leadershift. But I really wanted to kind of create somewhat of a scenic route so that we can see the many areas and the many other dots that we will connect in going forward. So Charles, let me turn this mic back over to you, and you could give us any kind of house rules. We should be reconvening soon, coming back together sometime soon. So Charles, good to host, good for hosting this, man. Thanks again.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you so much, everybody, first of all, for attending. And like I said at the outset, when we first had a chat with Andy on the whole issue of PDA and the polymathic requirement for where we are going, it was so revolutionary. That's why we said, when you first hear it, you really need time to just let it assimilate, because gears be going through your mind. You begin to examine yourself and query your own leadership. And what is it that you're developing, and re-understanding all this. And so I guess what we want to say is, at this point in time, some of you already have Andy's contacts. So if you want to ask him some queries directly, please go ahead. But for everybody else, let's just send the email. We've posted it there. We will definitely make the recording available to everybody who registered. So we'll create a link and send it to you. And Andy, I probably will ask you to share the slides up to where they are, so that we can send that out too, so people can then reread and go through whatever it is. And then we will let everybody know when the next meeting is. And from that time on, then we'll just build forward. But I guess today really set up the platform, the structure and the environment that will guide where we're going from here. It was also really good to see a lot of people I haven't seen in a long time. It was really a pleasure to see Selvan and Randolph and all those guys. It was really good to see you all, and I'm sure we'll continue to speak and talk about all the things that are going on. And we thank also all the people from around the world. I know we had some new people who joined us in from Canada, from the Cyrus community. We're glad you're with us tonight. And we're in so many time zones that it's almost impossible to imagine who is where. But we are grateful and we are thankful, and we'll take it from here. So from us all, it's good night until next Leadershift.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Okay, good night to all. Charles, thank you. It's been a while. Charles,
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thanks, Charles. Thanks, Andy.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Sandy.
Good night too. Thank you.